Welcome to episode 81 of the Breaking Balls podcast. Bob, it's been said that good things come to those who wait, and NASCAR fans had to wait out a lengthy rain delay at Kansas. But how's the closest finish in NASCAR history to make it all worthwhile, Bob?
Yeah, it sounds like we need to start praising Kansas as maybe one of the best tracks in NASCAR. We'll get into that. Ford's drought continues, but the big story, of course, Kyle Larson barely over Chris Buescher at Kansas.
Flags in the air. Boogity, boogity, boogity. Let's go racing, boys.
You know, it's kind of fitting we start with Darrell Waltrip, because in the words of DW to Larry McReynolds, have you ever, my friend?
No, I have not. I am still sweating from what I just saw. I don't even necessarily have the words. Like I said in the intro, we waited and waited and waited for this race to start, and from the very moment it got going until the finish, this was a remarkable race, Bob.
We had to watch the race so long that Max Verstappen's dominance in F1 might have ended. That's how long this rain delay took. But all joking aside, if you haven't been paying attention, if you're living under a rock, this finish here at Kansas Speedway, it was just absolutely, it was just clinical. What NASCAR really needed to keep that momentum going for a season that has produced a lot of storylines, some highlights. You had the close finish in Atlanta, one of the closest finishes of all time. And then Kansas said, we had all this hype coming in from last year. Can we replicate it? Can we do it again? Hold my beer, Clint Boyer. We are back. Kansas might be an elite track in NASCAR, ad.
Might be, Bob. I am ready to crown it as an elite track. I want the championship moved to Kansas. I want us to run at Kansas 4 times a year at this point. I am so excited about what I just saw. I mean, you could tell me that we're going to go back to Kansas instead of Darlington next week, and I would be kind of mad at you because I love Darlington, but at this point, I'm ready to see more of what I just witnessed. I mean, very funny because, very close finish in the Kentucky Derby on Saturday. NASCAR tweeted, at the Kentucky Derby, hey, we've seen this before. And little did they know we were going to get more of it just a day later and way closer than even Atlanta. I mean, I thought watching Atlanta that was going to be the closest finish I may have ever seen live watching a NASCAR race. And then today happened. And, we haven't even said it other than in the intro. Kyle Larson ends up winning this race over Chris Buescher. I mean, I guess we start there. I mean, where do you want to start with this finish, Bob?
I guess it's fair, though, we kind of gloss over the fact Kyle Larson won because the broadcast didn't know Kyle Larson won when he crossed the finish line. Originally, the call was Chris Buescher. You saw Chris Buescher's team celebrating in the pit box, and then the radio came over from NASCAR radio, team control. 5 cars, your winner. Kyle Larson spinning out, doing the donuts on the front stretch there. You got to feel for the 17 team, ad. They really, it looked like they had it. I guess my takeaway more than anything, obviously, besides just the fact that was an electric finish, was the fact that both these guys raced each other relatively clean. I mean, yeah, there was a little bit of dooring on the front stretch right toward the line, but I mean, as far as you can say, these guys raced each other with respect. You had Chris Buescher pushing Kyle Larson to the wall, but not into the wall. Gave him enough room to where he could still race his line. I think really, as a racing purist, you got to love what you saw today.
Absolutely. It was respectful, but it was just hard racing. It's exactly what you expect on the last lap with 2 guys who are really looking to get a win. And ultimately, both guys had their moments all day. I mean, Chris Buescher won stage 2. We'll talk about that a little bit later. I mean, Kyle Larson had a heck of a day, but it just, I didn't even have, this finish wasn't even on my radar, and I was considering this one of the best races that we have seen all year. So to then get this as a cherry on top, it's just, like I said, I'm still sweaty because I haven't really been able to calm down from this. It's calamity, Bob, absolute calamity.
And to our viewers and listeners, in fairness, in a day that ends in Y, Adam is probably likely to be a little sweaty if you know him well. But regardless, Adam, let's not get too personal. Again, Kyle Larson continuing his run of stage points and wins now. This is the second win on the season. I think we had 61 laps. Showed he was a car that you had to be aware of all day, whether it was the racing in stage 1, it was fantastic. And we'll talk about that here in a few, but he led laps all day today. throughout the race. It wasn't like he just came on at the end there. Chris Buescher kind of had a redemption story with a pit road mistake that was, saved by some shenanigans, if you will.
Well,
but just overall, when you watch this finish, you like you said, Ad, you had it land and you thought this is not going to get any better. The fact that NASCAR is 12 races in now and you have two of the closest finishes, I think, out of the top 3 in NASCAR history in the first 12 races, coming off of a Netflix series, ratings are already up. This is an absolute just perfect storm for NASCAR. Plus, like you said, we're going to Darlington next week. The Lady in Black throwback schemes, one of the best tracks historically for NASCAR with its roots. And I'm over the moon right now. I'm just still, like you said, I'm shaking. I'm pumped, man.
Dude, and the best part about this is that, with all the the finish and everything, we forget that Kyle Larson had that issue on pit lane that cost him 6 seconds. I mean, he dropped out of first place into 7th place. I think it was at stage 2, I want to say. Can't remember exactly. There's just so much. This was jam-packed. But all credit to the 5 team and Kyle Larson for just staying in it. I mean, because not only did they, to stay in it after losing those 6 seconds, they came back at the next pit stop and absolutely, propelled him into first, I believe. I mean, it just was an all-out team effort. Obviously, he's going to get a ton of credit, and rightfully so, because to be able to wheel that thing into victory lane and to get it by 1/1000th of a second, I mean, it's remarkable. It's just one of those things that like I said, I don't think I'm ever going to see anything quite like it. Oh God! See, look, I'm hitting my computer. I'm so excited right now. I can't. I don't know what to do with my hands.
He's starting to get uncontrollable, folks. We got to calm him down just a little bit here. Unfortunately, I'm going to do the opposite of that because we did touch on it just a second ago. But Kansas overall is a track. The racing today was just absolutely lights out from the start. Ad, you had stage 1, arguably one of the best stages we've had in the next gen car. Over half of the stage, it felt like, where the leaders were side by side, whether it was Denny Hamlin, Ross Chastain, and Kyle Larson. Those are the 3 guys. It felt like kind of the usual suspects early on in this race. And when I say they were, side by side, it was guys trying the high line passing you, and then on the low line passing you, and just basically flipping back and forth, back and forth. You'd blink, they'd change positions and lines again. And you thought, oh man, they're racing really aggressive for 35 laps into this race. Can they keep this up? Ultimately, the race pace was there today. I mean, you saw a little bit of a fuel save there toward the end, but Kansas Speedway, another year where it delivers with this next gen car. It feels like the next gen car was made for a track like Kansas. It is perfectly fit to it.
It is. It's the multi-lines. It's the progressive banking. It's all of it. It just creates this perfect storm for guys to just really be able to show the racecraft. And that's what matters here, is being able to put together lap after lap and finding new lines and finding ways that you can, make passes and, get out of dirty air. And it just seemed, this is, like you said, it feels like, for whatever reason, this track is what makes next gen racing what NASCAR anticipated it to be. I mean, as a fan base, I think we need to start, setting up encampments on college campuses to make sure that we race more 1.5 mile ovals. I mean, I don't know, man. I'm about to stand on a freaking desk and say we need to, like I said, we need to race at Kansas more often. We need more tracks like Kansas. Like I said, this is, after watching this has me just so excited, because week after week, it seems like NASCAR does this to where it builds and builds and the tension builds. And then all of a sudden you get to about, 10 laps to go in stage 3, and then something happens that just takes the air out of it. And here, even with the caution, the Kyle Busch spin that we thought was going to take a little bit of the air out of it, it elevated it. And I think that's just a testament to Kansas, the track that is Kansas. I think, when you line them up and get them on a restart, you're going to get something interesting, just because guys have to make decisions. And when you put the race in the driver's hands, they're going to make it interesting. These are the best race car drivers in the world. And anytime you give them, more control over the outcome of the race, as opposed to just like aero or engineering or anything like that, that's what the fans are there to see. And as a NASCAR fan, I'm smiling from ear to ear after watching this, because it was 3 stages of drivers having to make decisions, pit crews having to execute, and ultimately we got the best finish that we've ever seen. I mean, what more could you ask for in this race?
It really did check every box there, Ad. It had a Jimmy Johnson wreck. It had fuel saving. It had pit road mistakes, comers and goers. It had the photo finish. Yeah, it checked every box there. And you mentioned, Kansas hosting the championship. I'm really interested to see because it is a playoff race, so it is in the fall. They would go back there for the second date. That being said, the championship race is in November, so it's going to be a little bit colder in Kansas City, but I'm open to the fact that you can do this. I mean, like I said, they're already there in the fall. Today it was 60. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit colder probably in November down in Kansas City, but you've got the casino in the backdrop. You've got the facilities there that can handle a championship event. You're already in a major media market in Kansas City. There, you're in a major city in the U.S. It's in the heartland of America. Something different. A city like that will go all in for a NASCAR event like that. They have the championship. I know it's during football season when the Chiefs are the king there, but you have a place at the table if you really want to do something special there. Especially if you've been to that area before. It's a really developed area. It's got the soccer stadium there, which is world class. It's got a huge shopping center, a theme park. So it's a really developed area. It's not like a lot of these NASCAR tracks where it's out in the middle of nowhere, Addy. I know it's Kansas and Kansas City, but at least it's a good area for at least, like Phoenix, where it's right in the middle of the city.
And nothing to do with racing, but Buc-ee's just bought a massive plot of land. They're putting a giant Buc-ee's outside of this thing. So, I mean, at this point, Bob, if that's not championship material, I don't know what is. I mean, you've got a casino, you've got great facilities, and you've got a Buc-ee's. What more do you need to host a great championship for NASCAR?
Add in some pretty good barbecue, and I'm here to say that Breaking Balls is going to be pushing for Kansas to be a considerate on the championship race when they finally do move it around from Phoenix there, Ad. But we mentioned the fact that it's multi-groove racing, and there's a lot of pressure on these drivers in their hands. It felt like it was a tale of three races today, where you had the first two stages and that really great racing, especially at the front. You had some pit road mistakes, some guys having to pay for it, but fight their way back up through the field. It did take a while, but you could make your way through the field. And then you had this kind of middle stage where it was a little bit of calamity. I think you had 4 or 5 cautions in a row there. Actually, yeah, we got 4 written down here. And then you had that final act where, you had the fuel save and then the chaotic finish in overtime. But I want to go ahead and just tell you this, and then you can handle it here with the cautions. I want to say that you saw that restarts were so pivotal. Kevin Harvick made it a point multiple times on the broadcast where these guys were making mistakes and pushing it so hard in these restarts because that was where you could really make the time up. On these long green flag runs, you had to have your car settle in, where on a restart, you could catch 2 or 3 guys quickly. And I think it got to the point where stage 3, they got a little too squirrely and aggressive there, Ad, but it started with our old buddy Jimmy Johnson starting it off there, didn't it?
100%. I mean, anywhere where you can go 4, even 5 wide on a restart, I mean, it's going to create a little bit of calamity. I mean, Jimmy Johnson, it makes me sad because, it's not that I saw this coming, but, it just seems to be par for the course as of late. The next-gen car has not done him any favors. And obviously, he's a little bit angry with the 7 car. You heard it on the radio, and I get it because ultimately he did kind of help him get around. But
angry's a way to describe it, Ad. He looked like a very disappointed dad, where he shakes off the med crew and then just stands and just stares at Corey LaJoie. Not going to throw anything because he's a responsible team owner at the end of the day, but a very stern dad look before.
He was not mad. He was just disappointed. I've heard that many a times in my life. And I'm almost positive that is was exactly what was going through Jimmy Johnson's mind. It was measured. It was, that just like you said, the stern father, just so disappointed. I mean, ultimately, you're running around back there. We talk about it all the time. If you hang out in the back, you're going to have something like that happen to you eventually. And, Jimmy Johnson's just not quite used to running back there. Let's face facts. I mean, he's a 7-time champion for a reason. And, I mean, for fuck's sakes, the guy is so revered in the sport. He gave the command to start for drivers to start their engines from inside of his own car, which, sorry, Richard Petty, we didn't know where you went, but I guess, if you're going to lose a 7-time champion, you may as well just sub one right back in. So, just a very interesting day for Jimmy Johnson, Bob.
Thank God that Jimmy Johnson was there. Otherwise, they would have had to start going down the tiers on who's got the most championships around to do the the command there. Because Richard Petty just kind of disappeared on us. He was advertised to do it, and then I guess that he didn't hang around for the rain delay. Maybe he went and got some Joe's barbecue out there. That Z-Man sandwich is the real deal, so I can understand it, Richard. But Ad, you kind of touched on it, where especially like Jimmy Johnson, if you're in the back of the pack or in the midfield, things happen, whether it's your fault or not. It's the result of being caught up in track position there. And, another guy that was in there was Austin Cindric. He got caught up in that wreck there where, multiple guys ended up getting some damage there, but Cindric was the only one that had his day ended. And a guy like him needs the points and to finish days. Another day where, he struggles. And then you had guys where, Harrison Burton and Joey Logano. Harrison Burton, by the way, got some TV time. That's exciting. But Harrison Burton and Joey Logano both flat spot their tires and get stuck. And were you like me? Were you watching this? And as soon as they got stuck, you go, oh boy, here we go.
Well, it was so funny because you remember how mad Joey Logano was at the tow crew at Pocono for what they did to his car, and you could see it by how badly he was trying to get his car out of the situation in Kansas today. He was spinning the tires. He was basically burning the thing down to try and get it off the track. He did not want them going anywhere near his car. By the off chance that they damaged it and he could get back on the track, it was hysterical, Bob.
No, that was... You're right. I forgot. This is how much that happened in this race. You get the Chris Buescher 5 wide. You had all these highlights, but you had Joe Logano on all fours, flat spotted, refusing to give in to that tow truck team. He was trying to back it up, and you go about half inch. And I got it, but another result of for Joe Logano where he doesn't need it. He's hovering around that playoff cut line, but. Like we said, when you're running in the midfield, you're going to get caught up in stuff like that. You're going to be a victim, unfortunately, at half the time, or a certain amount of times when you're running like that, you're going to just, by the law of the odds, the midfield's going to eat you alive at some point.
Yeah, and in that Cindric wreck, two guys who really couldn't afford to get wrecked did, and that was Michael McDowell and Bubba Wallace. Ultimately, the caution gods were smiling upon them, and ultimately they were able to kind of salvage their days due to some of the calamity that followed, but. People forget that they were collected up in that Cindric wreck, and they could have had an awful day.
That's right, because I really was not expecting Bubba Wallace to even be running in this race after that wreck. And then you look up and him and McDowell are running top 5 there. But Ad, I'm glad you said that, because the Joey Logano spin especially, but the Harrison Burton one as well, that caution came out with, what was it, like 70, 75 to go roughly. And it was right on the edge of the fuel window. And you saw some of the guys like Chris Buescher and Denny Hamlin, who had their days kind of mired and you thought it was over after issues, basically revived on these self spins. These cautions came out and completely changed the race for these guys. And it turned into a fuel window race where, if this race goes green, we could be talking about Martin Truex finally getting revenge at Richmond on Denny Hamlin. Because it looked like Hamlin was fuel saving just enough to hold everyone off, but his squirrely old teammate MTJ. And then once again, NASCAR gods find a way to somehow take the victory from MTJ when it looks like it's on the horizon.
It's one of those things to where the NASCAR gods do not allow Martin Truex Jr. to win a race unless he absolutely dominates it. He just doesn't back into wins. It just doesn't seem to be his MO. But yeah, Bob, you touched on it. But let's face facts. Denny Hamlin, through really no fault of his own pit crews, which is kind of a weird thing to say, had so many issues on pit road, whether it was Austin Hill or Ryan Preece, he was just getting ran into left and right. And then, like you said, Chris Buescher, after winning stage 2, goes into pit. Obviously, they're excited. They're, pretty tense. Ford, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but they are struggling. And they made a mistake. And, the tire changer goes over the wall a little bit too early. They get penalized. You think their day is done, but lo and behold, you got to keep your head in it. It just is. It's a lesson in persistence at that point. You just got to keep your head in the race. And I'll credit to both of those guys because they ultimately ended up getting a way better day than we anticipated, given the mistakes.
You mentioned that pit stop with Chris Buescher, and they had the penalty, but he had to come back down pit road. And it was a very relatable moment for me with that pit stop there. Have you ever taken, a plastic bag, a trash can or a trash bag and tried to throw it and it just goes nowhere? Well, that's kind of what happened to the guy who was trying to rip the windshield tear off of Chris Buescher's windshield. Rips it off, tries to throw it. It just goes straight there and lands right on the roof. So Chris Buescher has to come back down pit road again because he's got a windshield tear off on the roof of the car. He had to ride around there. So it just felt like Chris Buescher's day went from we've got a shot here, it's all there, to it's over, to oh my god, we're back in this. It was just like a weird jolt of emotions for that 17 team. They had a weird day.
I was watching that tear off and looked at it, and it gave me flashbacks. We've had an artificial Christmas tree my entire life, and every time you got to put it away, you got to get that damn plastic cellophane wrap to wrap it up, and you're just sitting there and it sticks to itself, and it doesn't, anytime you try and move it, it doesn't go where you need it to. But Bob, the craziest thing about that whole thing was they didn't come down pit road to take it off. It literally fell off naturally. NASCAR didn't say anything to the team about it. They literally just let him go out there, start racing, and Clint Boyer said, after I think it was the
I thought for some reason he came back down pit road. My bad. Okay.
No,
they originally on the broadcast were talking about it. Okay.
Well, that's why they were all shocked, because they were like, no, he should have, but they didn't make him. And ultimately, everybody was kind of talking about the crew chief's decision, who, mind me, I don't know his name off the top of my head, but they were basically like, look, dude, you're going to serve this penalty anyway. Just come down and rip that off. It's going to mess with your aero, but ultimately it fell off pretty quickly. But I'm surprised NASCAR let him go back out on the track with it, because, I mean, especially given Trash Bag Gate earlier in the year with William Byron, it just felt like that was going to happen.
Yeah, I think really, though, if you've been watching the 2024 season, it really, if Ford can find a way to lose this race, they will. And what did we write down? Was it 0 for 31 now?
Yep.
I mean,
in the top three NASCAR series, it has been, the last 31 races, Ford is winless.
Good start. Very, very good start there. I believe that hasn't happened for over 12 years. It's been a long, long time. I think the record would be Sonoma's Xfinity race for Ford. If they haven't won by Sonoma Xfinity, it would break a record. But this is a team, Ford, or a manufacturer, that won the Truck Series Championship in Phoenix in November. They won the Xfinity Series Championship in November. And they swept and won the Cup Series Championship in November. They went for 3 for 3. So for them to be 0 for 31 now to start this new year, I mean, it's a struggle for Mad. That being said, they've come away now 3 of the closest losses to start the season. Atlanta with Blaney and that Suarez photo finish. You had Ryan Sieg and Sam Mayer a couple weeks ago where that was just heartbreaking for the Fords. And now this one. So the pace is getting up there, because I will say this today, Kansas is notoriously a Toyota playground, if you will, especially with this next-gen car. But Ford actually looked like they were okay today. Chris Buescher was just a microcosm, if you will, for how they ran today. I mean, you look at the top 10, Noah Gragson, Michael McDowell were up there, Brad Keselowski was up there with that fuel-saving race. Did they finally... You're a Ford man. Have they finally turned the tide here?
No, clearly not. I mean, it just seems like they're so snake-bitten at this point. I mean, Chris Buescher had a good day. I mean, he led 54 laps. I mean, and they qualified well. That's the thing with these Dark Horse Mustangs, especially, I'll focus on their Cup struggles, because the Dark Horse Mustang, it's been qualifying well. It seems to like clean air. There just seems to be something about this car that when it gets to racing, it just isn't, I don't know, it's just not agreeable with what's going on. I really don't have words for it, to be honest with you. It's kind of crazy, but yeah, it was just so crazy, because after watching qualifying and seeing how many Fords really put down fast laps, you thought, okay, it's Kansas. This is there's enough guys driving Fords. There's enough talent in the Ford camp to where somebody's got to do it. And ultimately they come up empty, not only in the Cup race, but in the truck race as well. Morale has just got to be so low if you're a Ford, if you have your OEM is Ford. I mean, it just seems like you're getting to the point where it's like, what the heck do we have to do to get a win?
Yeah, they're knocking on the door, and it feels like at a track today like Kansas, the 1.5 miles, they did take a stride. They took a step forward. a guy like Noah Gragson getting his third straight top 10, that's something that you do have to note for SHR. That's something they're trending right. I mean, Noah Gragson was a guy that we all scratched our heads when he was signed to that 10 car. We thought, what are they doing? Noah Gragson, the guy that had one of the worst rookie seasons in NASCAR history in that Legacy Motor Club seat last year. The fact that Noah Gragson, 3 straight top 10s, looks like he's the best SHR car, and at weeks, he's the best Ford car. I mean, you had like I said, you had RFK today a little bit. Another shout out is for the front row cars. Like you said, Michael McDowell kind of turned his race around, but Todd Gilliland especially had used that cycle in the late stages of the race with 70 to go and held on to his track position. Ultimately, the bar is not super high for Todd Gilliland, but 14th and in a year where Ford is lackluster at best, there are some glimmers of hope here, it looks like, Ad.
You have to think so. I mean, but ultimately, you need the wins. And it's one of these things to where it's like you're at the point, I think Brad hit the nail on the head when he finished second a couple weeks ago. We're not looking for second place. We're looking for wins. And I think that's not just an RFK thing at this point. It's got to be Ford. Just somebody's got to get the monkey off their back, because the longer this goes on, the longer we talk about it, the more it becomes a story, the more it kind of just becomes like a stigma that, okay, even if the Fords show up to the racetrack with speed, they're just not going to win. And that type of stuff, I mean, call it what you will, but I think it's contagious. I mean, not that I'm a bit, you have to sit there and meditate before every race and visualize what you've got going on, but ultimately, if you're going to sit there and talk negatively about, your chances in a race every single week, there's a strong chance you're not going to perform. And it just seems like right now it's not as big of a performance issue as maybe we're making it out to be, as much as it's just they just can't find a break. And it's got to be so disheartening, because they just keep putting themselves in position and just coming so close. I mean, literally as close as anyone has ever come in a NASCAR race to winning without winning. And here we are. It's just heartbreaking for Ford.
I think you hit the nail on the head, though, where it's the results. They're not getting the results. You heard me talk a minute ago about the good spots, the bright spots at Ford. But where are those usual suspects you expect? Joey Logano, 34th today. He's not 34th in speed, but didn't get the result today. He got caught up in some junk and, was running 10th, 15th and wasn't great today. Chase Briscoe, we've kind of sung his praises, but 21st today. We rag on Austin Cindric, but that's a Penske flagship team. And to run 37th, that's part of the reason that Ford is trending down, is their usual suspects. Ryan Blaney is dogging out there to get a top 15, top 10 finish every week. These guys, you don't have Kevin Harvick out there that can magically will a top 5 or a top 10 right now. And for Ford, yeah, you'll have the occasional moments like Buescher or Blaney, but they're not consistently up there. And I think that's the difference.
That's the thing, Bob. Today, if you look at the finishing order today, it is a microcosm of Ford's season, because you have Chris Buescher in second, and after that, you have to go all the way down to ninth. You see Noah Gragson, and that's where you start to see the Ford show up, because you got Noah Gragson, Michael McDowell, Brad Keselowski, and Ryan Blaney finishing 9th through 12th. I mean, it just seems to be that what this has been for Ford this year, to where it's like, is it a bad day at the racetrack? No, you're still in the top 15, and it is a good day at the racetrack. But ultimately, you're not looking for good days. You're looking for great days. And they need to have a great day soon, because ultimately, I think we're all asking the question if it's even possible.
Well, there was a good day in the Ford camp, Ad. We do it every week. We highlight it. Justin Haley, 18th place, was running top 15 in stage 3 and looked like, okay, we might have something cooking here. Looked up for a minute and was running 11th. But yeah, Justin Haley, 18th. That's a team, like we say every week, that's a good story. They are showing signs of improvement. But Ad, to kind of transition from the Fords, we'll go just around the block here, because you expect the Toyotas to be in the run here. We kind of haven't even mentioned Denny Hamlin. Our race led lap 71 today. It looked like he had a dominant car to start, then fell back. Like Michael McDowell and some of those other guys, was saved with those self-spinning cautions and revived his race. Martin Truex Jr., another guy, looked strong all day. But Toyota just a little bit off the pace at the very end there when it mattered in those last 2 laps. But another week where Toyota and Chevy look like the class of the field, especially Hendrick and Joe Gibbs.
Yep. I mean, Denny Hamlin led 71 laps today. Ultimately, you heard Denny talking this week on his podcast. He's saying, I got a good feeling about Kansas. I'm feeling good. And there was a part of the stage 3 where I thought to myself, my God, this son of a bitch is going to do it. He's going to call his shot again, 2 weeks in a row. But ultimately, just wasn't in the cards, with that weight. Kind of got used up on that, on the last restart there and just kind of fell out of position. But the sleeper of this whole thing that we really isn't going to get a ton of airtime talking about it, but Martin Truex Jr., the call on the last caution to pit and take 4 tires and dropping him back to 11th, it was kind of a head scratcher because everybody seemed to be taking 2.
I said it out loud.
It really seemed, it seemed as if it was, standard operating procedure for everybody in this race was they were going to take 2 tires, grab some fuel, and see what happened. Except for the wily veteran who decided to take 4. And on that last restart, went from 11th, I think as high as maybe 3rd or 4th place. He was flying. He had all the speed in the world, so much so that I thought that he was going to do what Kyle Larson did, to where he was just going to have a little bit more tire than everybody on the track and just find a way to really will himself into victory lane. But ultimately, like I said earlier, the NASCAR gods, if he's going to win a race, he's got to dominate the entire time. He wasn't going to steal it at the end. And it is one of those things to where you were right. This is technically, this is historically Toyota's playground. And, Christopher Bell really is kind of the poster child for that. He's won the pole 3 times at Kansas. I mean, impressive nonetheless, but ultimately just didn't get the result today. But yeah, you're right. It seems as if for, strictly because Ford's not winning, it's going to be a Chevy or a Toyota, and it's likely going to be either a Hendrick or a Gibbs car. It's just a matter of who it's going to be.
I will say we're at Kansas, and historically we've mentioned it's a Toyota playground, but Joe Gibbs has had some success. But 2311 with this next gen car has been dominant. 3 different drivers have won in that 45 car at Kansas. And it just felt like they were a little bit off today compared to Joe Gibbs Racing at Kansas. So you had Tyler Reddick run 20th and Bubba Wallace 17th. Reddick looked like he was good in practice in the long run, but it never translated over into the Sunday race.
It just felt like Tyler Reddick just kept in the most inopportune times just finding a way to, hit the wall. And ultimately, his MO at Kansas is he's going to ride as close as he can to the wall. It's one of the most impressive and fun things to watch, especially when he's kind of towards the front. But ultimately today, it just seemed like he couldn't necessarily find the rhythm. There was times in this race where he was ripping the wall, and it was some of the most entertaining racing. On a very entertaining day of racing, that is always something that will grab my attention, is just watching Tyler Reddick absolutely rip the wall. One of those dirt guys who is just, when you look at Kansas, it very much suits the style of a dirt racer. And like you said, you kind of expect more out of Tyler Reddick at a track like this. So got to be a disappointing finish. And then Bubba Wallace, I mean, to have the problems he had earlier in that Cindric caution, to just kind of get caught up and really it's just been bad luck for Bubba as of late. It just seems like the guy can't buy a break. I mean, anything that can hit him on the track will. Anything that can go wrong on pit lane just might. And it just seems like they're a little bit snake bitten over there in the 23 car. The 45 car, they're chilling. They got their win, but Bubba Wallace, not necessarily, we'll call it the most mentally stable driver from time to time. So it'll be interesting to see how Bubba handles this.
Yeah, they definitely need to get on a better pathway moving forward, because right now the playoff bubble, it's doable. You can get out of it, but you don't want to be in this position 5, 6, 7 races from now. You don't want to start stacking it. And right now they're stacking it. They don't want to be in a worse position a month from now. So that's something to watch moving forward. Just to kind of put a bow on it here, out on the results here. 2 other guys wanted to kind of highlight. Chase Elliott in 3rd, Alex Bowman in 7th. 2 guys, quiet days, weren't really ever a threat to win, it felt like, but guys that were consistent and had speed today. And especially someone like Alex Bowman, he's just got to get the confidence in that seat back. And especially with their teammates and the dominance they've had to start the season, for him, it's running top 10, getting results, not just showing flashes of speed, but getting it. And we're starting to see him maybe turn the corner the last few weeks here. But another big week for Alex Bowman, especially.
Yeah, I agree with you. And speaking of turning the corner, Bob, I mean, a guy who got turned around on the corner and ultimately gave us the, the crazy green-white checkered finish that we had. But Kyle Busch, I mean, it seemed like today might have been the day. I mean, it's a driver's track, and anywhere that the driver matters, you've got to circle Kyle Busch. And it seemed like today, it was going to be, it seemed like for all intents and purposes, he had a very good chance, very good race car, had things figured out. And then obviously the self spin there at the end, just heartbreaking for the folks over at RCR because, of all the teams, there's a ton of teams right now that need wins, but RCR just seems to be another in a long list of teams that's just scrambling right now to get a result.
Yeah. It was a race where Kyle Busch hadn't had his, one self spin or incident, and I guess the tax man needed to collect his debt, and whether it's 2 to go or 200 to go, you gotta get it sometime. But yeah, like you said, you kind of wondered maybe this is going to be the race where Kyle Busch finally gets that monkey off his back and gets that win to keep his win streak alive every year. I think he's on 19 seasons in a row. He's looking for 20. But yeah, another race where a what if for Kyle Busch. I don't think ultimately he had the speed to compete with Kyle Larson, but it is interesting when you get to that overtime finish. It's not about the speed; it's about just staying alive and getting there.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think, you know what, Bob, we don't do this often, but we should kind of look into our crystal ball a little bit here because without that Kyle Busch self spin, we were very much in a weird fuel saving race. You heard Chris Gabehart basically, as nervous as you've ever heard him talking to Denny Hamlin about, I don't know how this is going to go. Thought Tony Romo was on the box the way that he was kind of a little bit nervously. I don't know, Jim, what's going on? But we seemed like we were headed for a completely different finish than what we ended up with. And Martin Truex Jr., before that caution came out, it looked like he was not only going to pass Denny Hamlin for the lead, it looked like he was just going to blow the field out of the water. And then ultimately, the caution happens and we get what we got. But it is so weird that NASCAR seems to be doing this as of late, to where we're so ready to talk about one thing on this podcast, and then all of a sudden, the last 10 laps, here we go, and the show gets flipped on its head.
Yeah, I mean, I said a little bit ago where Martin Truex Jr. almost got revenge for Richmond, but that's why you don't write the game notes or you don't record the podcast until the checkered flag flies. And ultimately, Kyle Larson's going to be the one in our thumbnail tonight in that close finish. But yeah, another race at Kansas where it was just an absolute banger there. We'll be at Darlington next week. It's going to be the throwback week. We'll have all the schemes and all that. Of course, if you're here at the pod, you're still listening, like, subscribe, share it, be a friend, tell a friend. We will be putting out content throughout the week, of course, as well. But yeah, just another week where, as a NASCAR fan, I feel like I was fed very, very well. I'm going to bed very stuffed and a happy boy.
Yeah, I could not ask more of a racing series than I got from NASCAR today. It was entertaining. There was passing, there was multiple racing lines, there was drama, there were cautions, there was pit road calamity. I mean, there's so much stuff that I am convinced that we are missing something in this podcast, but ultimately, we'll supplement if we have to in the week, but it just knee-jerk reaction here, Bob. I finally have stopped sweating a little bit. I'm sure that will start, back up here. But my God, I could inject this race into my veins every single day of the week and twice on Sundays and be just the happiest person on earth.
No, I'm with you there, pal. Well, like I said, this is episode 81 of the Breaking Balls podcast. If the LA area is under a drought, Adam can go wring his shirt out, and I'm sure that'll get the drought over for at least a day or two. But and all jokes aside, Ad, since I've slandered you like that, I cooked you, I barbecued you, I'll let you have the last words, my friend. You take over from here.
Yeah, if you hear a siren coming from the Santa Ana River, don't be alarmed. That's just me wringing out my shirt.